last-minute shake-up at 5:30 a.m., laundry situation not good. And when your focus is on helping your clients, it's easy to forget about yourself. But NASM knows trainers.
Morning, Ryan. It's okay.
And staying in front of the day isn't always as
Thanks,
simple
Ryan.
as 1,
What's
2,
up?
3. So when the unexpected has you pressing pause,
What's the latest on creatine?
I'm going to get back to you on that.
let NASM 1 help you press play. Visit NASM.org to sign up for a membership today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Master Instructor Roundtable. I am Wendy Batts, here with my friend, co-host, and colleague, as always, Dr. Marty Miller. Marty, how are you today?
I'm great, Wendy. How's everything over there in Atlanta?
Everything is good. And today we are actually going to have a very special guest. Brian Sutton is going to be joining us. And Brian has been, I don't know, like one of my favorite people at NASM for a very long time. He is a senior content manager. And if you guys own one of the NASM CPT books, doesn't really matter what edition, you're going to see Brian's name all over that text. And so we are bringing him on today, and we're going to talk about the new GLP-1 course. So we're going to get the skinny on the course. The course title is Understanding Weight Loss Medications, a Guide for Fitness and Wellness Professionals. So why don't we go ahead and bring Dr. Sutton in?
Hi, guys.
Hi, B.
Brian,
Hello.
how's it going?
Good. How are you?
We're doing great, and we're thankful you're taking some time out today to spend with us, because we know that this is a critical and a very important topic in the industry. We know that there's been a massive rise in the use of GLP-1s, and we just want to continue to pour into our professionals, give them the best understanding of what is going on, and possibly even what has changed since these medications have hit the market. So with this course, Brian, coming right out of the gate, can you give us a little idea of who participated, who the authors were in this, and maybe a little bit about their background? Because I have a feeling it's not just from one part of an industry. You probably had a kind of a broad stroke of people, because it's such a unique topic.
It is a unique topic, and boy, is it changing fast. The science, the medicine they're doing so much research on these medications. So we actually got a nice group of people from different backgrounds to help us write the content. We had Dr. Ed Davia. He's a medical doctor, a doctor of osteopathic medicine. He works in internal medicine, so his specialty is chronic disease and obesity. He was fabulous to work with. We had Dr. Marissa Mauricio, and she's a pharmacist. She has a doctorate in pharmacy, and her specialty is also working with patients with obesity. Dr. Brad Dieter, he is a PhD and postdoc in nutrition and diabetes, so makes sense to bring in Dr. Dieter. He's worked with us a bunch in the past. I mean, we've had so many good people. Dr. Scott Cheatham, and he is a PhD and DPT. Him and I collaborated a lot about the exercise protocols for individuals on GLP-1s, and he was one of the main authors for this project. He did a really good job putting a lot of the content together. And then my boss, Mike Fonagrassi, also helped in peer reviews as well. So who has a degree in nutrition as well as exercise science. So it was the combination of a medical doctor, a pharmacist, a nutrition diabetes expert, a physical therapist, and a couple fitness guys. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
That's amazing. Well, Brian, like to kind of dig deeper into what the course is about, can you talk about, I know that you talked about the writers, but can you give us a little bit more about what the course involves? I know that I think there's a practical application part, right? And then obviously the evidence-based component. So can you give us a little more detail about that?
Yeah, when we wrote the content, we divided it up into 3 lessons. And so we start off with talking about the obesity epidemic and what's going on with obesity and what's going on with diabetes, because these medications treat both obesity and type 2 diabetes. And then we break it down even to further of what are the medications, the history of the medications, because this goes back to the early 2000s. And then we do a deep dive into all the different types of medications. And then we have an entire section on what does this mean for the fitness and wellness professional. And then the last closing section is what happens when your clients or patients, depending on who you are, discontinue the medication. So we really wanted to provide three things: evidence-based content, practical application, and then hopefully provide it in a way that improves learning outcomes, so someone understands and can use this information in their practice. So that was our aim, that was our goal.
Excellent. And, Brian, I know there's like you said, 3 parts. So I believe there's a practical and evidence-based component, and then some type of like comprehensive learning. Can you dive into those areas a little bit more?
Sure. So in the beginning, it's a brief overview of the obesity epidemic and the chronic conditions related to obesity, what happens, right? So increased risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, sleep apnea, fatty liver disease, all these different things that are at risk when somebody's weight management is not, or weight is not managed. So we go into that. Then we go into a whole deep dive into the history of these medications, where they started, what they do, how they act, the pros and the cons, because there's always going to be risks and benefits of different medications. So we go into it. We look at semaglutide versus tirzepatide, and then we have a good section on, okay, now that I'm with my clients as a fitness professional, maybe I'm a wellness coach, how do I design workouts? What sort of the guidelines that I should follow if somebody is doing this? So it's more of a comprehensive approach, but we really wanted to give everybody a good solid foundation: what these drugs are, how they work, what are the risks, what are the cons, or what are the benefits, and then you as a coach, what do you need to do? And we do have a lot of content on scope of practice too, as well.
So Brian, well, first of all, guys, I just want to say that we are live here today on the Master Instructor Roundtable. Obviously, we're getting the Skinny on GLP-1's with Wendy Batts, Marty Miller, and special guest Brian Sutton. So if you have questions, this is the time to ask, because Brian is going to be a perfect resource, because I know that there are many questions that Marty and I get from our clients that are asking questions that I haven't taken the course yet because it was just recently launched, that I don't have answers for, but maybe Brian will. So Brian, you're starting to talk a lot of technical lingo here. So I know you said something about the semaglutides and what else did you say? Something else.
Tirzepatide, yeah.
Yes. Can you go into the detail about what those are?
Sure. So those are the 2 primary or most popular medications that someone can have. So a brief history of how these medications work. They originally were developed to treat type 2 diabetes, to help manage somebody's glucose levels. Because obviously, if somebody has diabetes, they have too much glucose in the blood, and it's either because their pancreas doesn't secrete enough insulin, or their cells have become insulin resistant. So they looked at, okay, how can we help better manage this disease? So the start was with GLP-1's. And I'll get a little techie. So a GLP-1 is what is it? Glucose or glucagon polypeptide 1. It's a hormone. And it's produced in the intestines, pancreas, the brain, but mostly in the small intestine. And so when somebody eats, no matter if it's protein, carbohydrate, fat, or a mixed meal, like what most of us actually eat, this hormone is released, this GLP-1. It's a naturally producing endogenous hormone that's released. And what it does is it helps signal satiety, so it helps us feel full. It'll slow gastric emptying, so it'll keep food in the stomach and the intestines a little bit longer. It slows it down, which helps us feel full. And ironically, in the brain, it will send signals for us to not crave, not to have that excitement around food. The thing with the GLP-1 hormone is that it has a really short half-life. It only lasts about 2 to 3 minutes in the body, and then it's gone. What GLP-1 medications do is when someone injects themselves, or there's also a pill form, it can last now up to a week. So now they are feeling fuller, they have less hunger cues, they have less food cravings. So it's an appetite suppressant. So now they eat less. Now, because they're eating less, they lose weight and they manage their blood glucose levels. So that's semaglutide. Then there's another one called tirzepatide, which is a newer version of it. It's a GLP-1, but it also has another hormone that it works on called a GIP, which is glucose-dependent insulin-tropic polypeptide. I think I got that right. So it's basically, it works very similar to GLP-1, little bit differences, but it also increases insulin levels. It decreases glucagon excretion. So those two hormones work in opposite ways too. So glucagon increases blood glucose and insulin decreases blood glucose. So anyway, the tirzepatide, it is one molecule hitting two receptors, so GLP-1 and GIP. So semaglutide, one molecule, one receptor. Tirzepatide, one molecule, two receptors. And now there's lots of data now showing how tirzepatide is even more impactful as far as weight loss goes compared to semaglutide or semaglutide. It's tomato, however you want to pronounce it.
Yeah, that's excellent. And Brian, we have a question and kind of reiterating what I'm about to say, from Faith to Trainer. Great overview, Brian. But the question is, what's the opinion, or does NASM have an opinion of retatrutide?
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
Yeah, retatrutide. Yeah.
Okay, I had it in the ballpark. He was reading this as the new one, which attacks the adipose tissue only versus muscle. Interesting. Is that
possibly? So it's not FDA approved yet. I think it's in phase 3 trials right now, and it is showing that so what it does is it's one molecule, now 3 receptors. So retatrutide will be GLP-1, GIP, and then it'll also hit some glucagon receptors to reduce glucagon excretion. The trials are showing that it has even significantly more weight loss than tirzepatide or semaglutide. But there's still more data that has to be collected as far as side effects and dosages and all those things before it could get FDA approved. I don't know. I haven't read any studies yet, but they probably exist. I just haven't read them on retatrutide's effect on lean body mass. I don't know that answer right now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Brian, I'm going to go off script. I said I wouldn't, but I got it. Because these are the questions that I get from my clients. You see it all over. There are songs. My son can sing songs about Ozempic and all these, Wegovy's and all the different commercials that are out there.
Yeah.
And again, the whole purpose of obviously the GLP-1s and coming kind of to the forefront was, as you said, obesity. But what if somebody that's not obese, that wants to go and do a quick weight loss, that's healthy and doesn't have an insulin issue, doesn't have any problems of why somebody should be taking these? I mean, what's this? Is there a side effect to that, or is that even possible?
Well, first thing is, in order to take semaglutide or tirzepatide, any of these things like Wegovy or Rybelsus or Ozempic, it has to be prescribed by a doctor. So it's not like you can purchase this without a doctor's prescription. Now, there are places, even underground black market online that you can find, which I don't recommend. And I can actually tell a personal story behind that. It's crazy. But what these medications are designed to do is either one, it's either one to treat type 2 diabetes or obesity or overweight obesity. And so to be prescribed one of these medications, let's say it's for weight loss, because that's, I think as Fit Pros, most of us are going to be dealing with individuals who are seeking weight loss. You have to have either a BMI of 27 or higher, plus one comorbid condition like hypertension or dyslipidemia, some type of comorbid condition. So 27 BMI plus chronic disease, you will qualify for a weight loss drug. Or you would have a BMI of 30 or higher, which is technically obesity, and then you can be prescribed a GLP-1 or GIP agonist. But that's the only way that you can actually get the drug unless you're buying it black market. So does that make sense?
Well, you said a story. Do you have a story to share for us of why that would not?
I do. So I have a friend of a friend who was purchasing semaglutide off the internet from China through some underground. I'm not sure how she managed to do this, and she's lost significant weight. But you don't know what you're going to get. And that's one of the things, like, I actually had a family member is like, hey, maybe I should do this too. And I'm like, absolutely not. If you're going to do it, please do it the right way and talk to your doctor. And this individual didn't have much weight to lose. They were looking at a 5 to 10 pound weight loss. I'm like, the last thing you want to do is buy a drug off the black market on some unknown internet source for 5 to 10 pounds. We can do this the old fashioned way through diet and exercise. So, yeah.
Yeah, people are always looking for the easy way out, right, Brian? Sometimes.
Sure. Yeah, it's a little scary.
Right. So those of you just joining us today on the Master Instructor Roundtable, Marty Miller here with co-host Wendy Batts and great longtime friend, Dr. Brian Sutton. We're talking the skinny on GLP-1s and training clients. But I want to share with everybody today that this episode of the Master Instructor Roundtable is brought to you by NASM One, the membership for trainers and coaches. Members enjoy unlimited access to hundreds of career resources. Get the Edge app to schedule and program clients. Enjoy half off of all certifications and specializations, access to free CEUs and more. All this just for $35 a month. Go to nasm.org/membership to learn more about NASM One. So, Brian, now we're talking about all this amazing information, but what are the major side effects of using these type of drugs?
Yeah, great question. So it's mostly going to be GI distress. So it's going to be constipation, diarrhea, nausea, and vomiting. Those are the big main four that's going to happen. And it makes sense because what these drugs do is they slow gastric emptying, right? So imagine if I just ate a meal and it's breakfast time and now it's lunch. I usually eat a meal again. So I go and I eat a normal sized lunch like I would have previously before taking the drug. Well, that food hasn't moved much because it slows the gastric emptying. So my stomach, my intestines are still full of food. So now I'm going to feel nauseous. I might even vomit because it's slowing that gastric emptying of the food. And which also, because it does do that, it reduces satiety signals. So I don't feel hungry. But those are going to be the main four. And then another side effect that they are discovering is pancreatitis. So sometimes it's a small subset of people, but they can develop pancreatitis, which is basically inflammation of the pancreas. So there are ways to mitigate the GI distress. Number one is smaller meals rather than trying to eat a big bolus of food, right? So let's eat smaller meals and then time those meals appropriately throughout the day. But it's going to be a side effect. It's going to be GI distress. That's just common, unfortunately.
So, Brian, are these drugs FDA approved?
100%. Yep, 100%. Depends on which drug you're talking about and when they got FDA approved. So semaglutide was approved first, and then tirzepatide was approved after that. So I think, and there are other classes of drugs even before semaglutide. There were glutide and some others, but the drugs keep getting better and better. The half-life keeps increasing. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Now, this is just me speculating. I don't have any data to prove this. Right now, they last for about a week. I wouldn't be surprised in a year if they can last like 2 weeks, 3 weeks before you need another injection. That's what they're trying to do, because going to the doctor's office and getting a shot, not comfortable for people. And of course, they are experimenting with the pill form. Ribelsis is the only pill form available. It's semaglutide for type 2 diabetes, but it's not as effective as Ozempic is, which is the injectable form for type 2 diabetes. Yeah.
So are there other conditions that people are using for GLP-1s, GIP medication? I've heard some rumors, but I'd like to hear.
Yeah, great point. So it just got approved for sleep apnea. So somebody has sleep apnea, and it's, which one was it? I think here, I actually have notes here. Where did I put it? Oh, Zepbound. Okay, so Zepbound is tirzepatide. Zepbound is just the common name that you would see on the commercial. So that it's been approved for sleep apnea, and then Wegovy got approved for cardiovascular disease, as long as somebody also has overweight, obesity. So if someone's overweight and obese, and they have cardiovascular conditions, they can take Wegovy as well.
Okay, Brian, so how does that relate? You know, we're talking about weight loss and stuff. I mean, obviously sleep apnea, is it just because they're overweight? Is that kind of the relationship behind that? As you lose weight, you
Pretty much.
don't snore?
Yeah.
Don't keep your others up.
But this is the first time this has ever been really done. You know, obesity is linked to so many different chronic conditions, whether it's sleep apnea, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, liver disease, kidney disease, right? It has profound reaching effects across different bodily systems. So as somebody loses weight, their cardiovascular outcomes improve, their respiratory outcomes improve, their liver function improves, their kidney function improves. So yeah, it's more than anything, it's the side effect of the weight loss, which is a good side effect. There are also some bad side effects that could happen from weight loss, but overall, yeah, it's promising.
It's great to hear. So what about lifestyle changes, dietary restrictions that are required when taking these type of medications?
Yeah, so I think one thing that we hear quite a bit, and it's no different than if someone was, like, say, on a very low calorie diet, which essentially what these drugs tend to produce, right? If I'm feeling full all the time, maybe I have a little bit of nausea, I'm not getting the reward from food that I normally get, I'm going to eat less, right? So the consequence of eating less is I'm fewer calories, fewer nutrients. So I might not be getting as much fiber. I might not be getting as much vitamins and minerals in my diet. So those are potential things. But another thing that could potentially happen is the loss of lean body mass, including muscle. So we want to make sure that if somebody is taking one of these medications, that one, they're eating a significant amount of protein. Generally speaking, that's about 0.7 to 1 grams per pound of body weight. So if you're, say, 200 pounds, that's like 140 grams to 200 grams of protein per day to help preserve that lean muscle mass. And you want to make sure that you're eating enough fruits and vegetables to get your vitamin and mineral intake. Maybe a supplement could help if you're a picky eater and you don't like fruits and vegetables, like a multivitamin. And then another important thing to consider is tracking, or at least having knowledge of your caloric energy intake, right? How much are you actually eating per day? Because you don't want to go where if I'm taking a medication and now my caloric deficit is 1,200, 1,500 calories a day, that's going to be significant weight loss and potentially side effects like loss of lean body mass. So we want to keep the caloric deficit, somewhere manageable. 700 calories a day is generally more manageable than something extreme. So even if someone's on a medication, they still need to eat enough food or supplement so they're not in extreme caloric deficits. Yeah.
So, Brian, there was a question that came up, and it kind of blends into my next question too. I know personally, I've heard people, especially when they first came out on the market, that we're not really sure about what's going to happen long term. But like you just mentioned, with rapid weight loss and bone mass, then obviously there could be, as we age, if someone continues to stay on this drug, I would think there'd be obviously a huge bone density issue where somebody that was, maybe has a history of osteopenia or osteoporosis, like, does that become more of an issue? And can you talk about any contraindications that have already been noted?
Yeah, so when it comes to bone density and loss of muscle mass, it's important to realize that the medications themselves don't have a direct mechanism. So it's not like semaglutide is decreasing bone mass or decreasing muscle mass. It's a result of the weight loss, the caloric deficit that's happening. Even if someone was on an extremely low calorie diet and not taking the medications, they're going to lose some lean body mass. They're going to lose some bone mass because they're not as heavy anymore. So because they're not as heavy, there's not as much stress on the bones. And because the bones aren't stressed, then you could potentially lose some bone mass. So that is a potential side effect. Now, in the trials, it wasn't drastic, but it's important to note when they've done these clinical trials, and there was a bunch of them, the individuals in these RCT trials weren't just taking the medication. They were also involved in a lifestyle program of diet, exercise, and wellness practices. Like they're working with the trainer, they're working with the dietitian, and they're working on a support system throughout the whole thing. So the drugs are not meant to just be take an injection or pop a pill and that's it. You can, and you would probably lose weight, but the ideal way to do it is the way they did it in the actual clinical trials, where you also do some strength training, you do some exercise, you watch your diet, maybe even work with the dietitian, and you have a support group to help you through it. But as far as bone mass goes, you're going to see relatively same loss of bone mass as you would as if someone was doing an extreme low calorie diet, which has been studied immensely, in like medical ward studies where they're feeding people 800 calories a day and they're morbidly obese and they lose a lot of weight and they lose some muscle and some bone. It's the same type of effect. It's just because the more rapid you lose weight, the more rapid you'll lose muscle and bone as well.
Great. Thanks for that, Brian. What about long-term use? Since it's a newer drug, do they have any studies or any at least thoughts on long-term use?
So they have some studies and a lot of different thoughts on these drugs because they've been around since the early 2000s, but they've really gotten popular because they've managed to improve the half-life. So, I mean, it used to start with a twice a day daily injection. No, I don't know anybody who wants to get injected twice a day, right? It's not feasible. But now it's like once a week, so it's much different. There's two ways of looking at long-term effects. If I have obesity and maybe an associated chronic condition, maybe it's hypertension or dyslipidemia or something like that, there's risk to being obese and having cardiovascular disease. But there's also risk of taking a medication. So you have to weigh one versus the other. Generally speaking, right now, there's a big consensus that long term someone can stay on these medications. Now, what's most appropriate is the dosage. So as someone starts on the medication, they may titrate up, and then as they reach closer to their goal weight and their conditions improve, they may titrate down a little bit. Now, they may come off the drug completely, or they may be on what is a low dose maintenance dose. But we don't have any studies for 20, 30, 40 years because it just hasn't been around that long.
So Brian, there was a question that came up. Is there a recommended approach on programming for clients using these medications?
Great question. Yes and no. So what we have to do is use what the science has, the existing science is right now. So we do have exercise protocols for individuals who are overweight or obese. We have exercise protocols for individuals with type 2 diabetes. So we have to generalize. If I'm working with a client, maybe they're overweight and they have hypertension. Okay, well, we already have exercise protocols for that type of client. And just because they're on the GLP-1, we're still going to follow generally what those guidelines are. And most often, the physical activity guidelines for Americans, or which is now adopted by the World Health Organization, just the physical activity guidelines of PAG, right? 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity per week, which breaks down to about 30 minutes, 5 days a week of maybe it's a brisk walk or light jog, and 2 days of resistance training. So those are the physical activity guidelines. So we could start there. But what I always recommend to any fitness professional is we're going to still do the same things that we're taught. Let's do the assessment, right? Let's figure out their strengths and weaknesses from an aerobic efficiency standpoint, a flexibility standpoint, a strength standpoint, mobility, movement assessments. So let's just do the assessment and let's design a workout for that individual based on their own individual fitness level, keeping in mind, okay, they may be overweight or have obesity, they may be type 2 diabetic, which, okay, then let's make sure we have a carbohydrate snack. Let's make sure they check their feet for blisters. All those general precautions that we all know about, we're going to follow those. But we don't have like rules for somebody on GLP-1s, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Brian. I know a lot of common sense comes in here and that's helpful, but are there any common client challenges that people should be considerate of, as a fitness professional training people who are on GLP-1s?
Yes, definitely. So probably number one is going to be fatigue, because they're not consuming as much energy as they typically would. So fatigue is definitely a factor. So they just may not have it that day when they're going into the gym or wherever you're training your client. So fatigue. And then, of course, the other side effects that I mentioned, so the nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, or constipation is another factor that could impact their workouts, and their hydration status. That is something I would think it's more anecdotal, but it makes sense. If someone's not eating as much, then they're not getting the water from the food sources that they normally eat. So you might have to address their hydration as well. And plus, because they feel full, they may not be drinking as much. So monitor their hydration, monitor their fatigue. Ask them if they're having any GI problems that day, and then you can go about your workouts typically as you normally would.
Nice. Well, there was another question that came in, Brian. Actually, there was two more questions that came in, but I'll go ahead and go in order. So Ryan asked, has there been any data on the effects on long-term hormone response?
I would need a little bit more context on long-term hormone response because there's so many different hormones in the body. What we can say is that as somebody takes these medications, let's say they're a type 2 diabetic, then their diabetes condition improves, right? That's the whole purpose of it. So they're able to manage their blood glucose levels much better. And they'll also bring down their glucagon type response to it as well. So what am I looking for? So anyway, I'm just saying like their condition will improve through that. Other hormones, it's hard to say what is the thyroid going to be affected or any of that. I don't know. We'd have to dig into the literature for that. I don't know. Yeah.
No, thank you for that. Like you said, it's going to be case by case, person by person as well. So with this course, can you let people know, we've talked about a lot of what's in it, but it sounds like it's a pretty in-depth course. How many CEUs is this course worth?
Yeah, it's worth 0.4 NASM CEUs and 4 AFA CEUs. Yeah, so it's about 4 hours worth of content. So I think people will get a kick out of it. It's especially if this type of content interests you. Yeah, yeah. So it's 0.4.
Thank you, sir.
Nice. Well, and Brian, there's the other question that came up is like, where do we find these exercise protocols? And we're going to say probably in the course, I'm guessing, from what you're talking about, because I know that obviously you have gone through, you've worked with all the docs and the writers to put this together. Can you give us a little bit more about, I mean, we talked about kind of what's in the course, but when they go and they sit for, is there an exam? Is that how that works? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it works just like any other continuing education course that we offer. So there'll be an exam. You need a 70% or better to pass the exam. It's fairly short, so it's 20 questions from a larger pool of questions. So as long as you get 70% or better, you'll get the CEUs that you need to help recertify. So yeah.
Is this on NASM 1 too? Just really quick. Sorry, Marty.
No worries.
If it's not on yet, it will be very soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, everyone heard why you should be a member of NASM 1, right? So, Brian, this is amazing work. You've put so much great content out there throughout your years of NASM, and I'm sure this is no different. So thank you so much for your expertise. We always love having you on, and pretty much every time we have you on, something new is launching. So, you know, people keep looking out for when we have Dr. Brian Sutton on. You know, something's coming down the pike.
Yeah, thank you. We got some more. We got some really cool products coming up too, so I'm excited. And the one thing with this one, because the science is evolving, we're going to come back to this. It's not going to be where, okay, we just launched the content and it's static and that's it. Because I guarantee in a year there's going to be a new class of medications, something else is going to happen, right? So we're going to come back to this and we're going to keep revising it and stay up to date with this because it's such an evolving content. I do want to reiterate that this class of medications requires a doctor's prescription, so please be wary of that. The other thing I wanted to address, because we do see it, there are compounding pharmacies and other places like, you know, med spas and things like that that do offer like these drugs, these medications. It's important to note that semaglutide or semaglutide and tirzepatide are patented by the pharmaceutical manufacturers, right? Whether it's Lilly or Novo Nordisk. So if you're going to purchase semaglutide or tirzepatide from, say, like a med spa, it's not the same thing. It could be a GLP-1 like semaglutide, but it could be manufactured differently with different salts. They could be adding different additives to it, like maybe a B12 complex. So it's not exactly the same as what you would get from a doctor's prescription who's going directly from the manufacturer. So that's important to know. Doesn't mean that person may not have successful weight loss, but the trials weren't developed the same way the med spas are developing the drugs. Awesome. So just as everyone understands, yeah.
Brian, well, before you go, thank you for that added information. One more question coming in. What's the name of the course? Can we get a little soundbite?
Yeah, Understanding Weight Loss Medications, a guide for fitness and wellness professionals.
Love it. All right, Brian. We'll let you get back to your full-time job. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you both. Yeah.
I love it. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate you.
He's awesome. So, Wendy, this is a great topic. I'm glad you threw that out there. And it was, you know, as every week we learn something here too. So I really appreciate that. And what I want to do as a final comment, and then Wendy, I'll wrap it up, is next week is HFA, the old URSA. NASM will be there. Stop by booth 2020. Come check it out. If you're going to go to HFA and be in Vegas, you're going to have some, I'll be there. Not for NASM as much, but I'll be there. But I know NASM will be pleased to have you stop by the booth at booth 2020.
Yes, I will not be there. My husband will be there.
You'll be missed, but I'm sure I'll grab dinner with Tony. So Wendy, thank you so much. I think we got through all the questions, and we really appreciate you coming on live with us. Keep the questions coming. And Wendy, do you want to give all these great people your contact information?
Yes. If you guys have, if you have specific questions, I would tell you to reach out to Brian Sutton, and it's brian.sutton@nasm.org. He will be the person that will be able to answer questions better than myself and or Marty in this situation. However, if you do have questions regarding any other content or questions about the courses that NASM offers, or just questions, or just want to say hi, you can always find me on Instagram at wendy.batts13, or you can email me at wendy.batts@nasm.org.
And my information's right here, dr.martymiller72 for Instagram, and then marty.miller@nasm.org. So Wendy, thanks again. And for all of you that joined us, we always really appreciate it. And most importantly, look forward to seeing you next week on the Master Instructor Roundtable.